Okay, so we're starting off with a plain HTML page. We're going to add a title, and then we're going to add content section by section. So we're going to add the top header and subheading, and then some content, a list of content for the next section, and then some items that are going to display next to each other in a series of boxes, and then another list of content, and then we're going to finish up the page with an about section. And each of these sections has a heading and some content. We're going to just look at how that looks. It's just a bunch of text for now. Switching back, we're going to actually go to the top of the page and just add the boxes style sheet. That's going to add just some basic typography and some space around the sides of the page. Next, we're going to add some sections, some extra sections here just because we know we're going to have media there. Then we're going to add section elements around each section of content. And these are what we call boxes in Boxes.css. And that's just going to split up the content into these boxes that maintain their aspect ratio across the entire page. The next thing we're going to do is add background colors. So we're going to add a dark background color to the body, and we're going to add a light yellow background color to all of our boxes. So you can see here that we just added it to all of our sections, and now we have the dark background color and then the light yellow foreground for all of our boxes. Then we're just going to add in this filler section right here because we're missing that at the bottom of the page. There was kind of that empty dark space. Now we're going to add content classes to all of the sections that have content in them. That's going to center the text in the middle of the box as well as add a little padding on either side. So let's just add the content class going down the page. And we're just going to make sure it's on all of them. We're also going to add this little extra section here to the About section, just so that we have some room for media beside it. So there you can see the media box that will be. Next, we're just going to indent these sections and then just split it up into 4 different sections. So these are going to be 4 little boxes that are next to each other. And you can see how that looks right there. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then we're going to do that the same way with the next section. So we're just going to add 4 section elements and surround all the content there so that it's all right next to each other. So we have the benefits on the left and the features to the right. Next, we're going to just add some content classes to each of those inner boxes, and we're going to do that for both of the sections. That's just going to add some padding around each box and center them. Now we're going to add a tall class to this content. This is the only tall class we're going to use, but it's just going to give us a little bit more room for that inner box so that it's going to take up 2 vertical inner boxes. Now we're going to add our media. These are going to be images inside of all of the sections that we want images in. And that's going to be beside our content. We have the small media at the bottom and then these 2 larger pieces of media. We're also going to add media classes to those sections, which will mean that the images will be sized to their maximum available width and height while maintaining their aspect ratio. Then we're going to add some headings. We got our H1 and H2 there. Then we've got a few H3s down here. We're going to add a list of items here, an unordered list. Then we're going to add some H4s for our benefits section. And then again, some H4s and some paragraph tags for our feature section. And then our final H4 and paragraph tags for our about section. And now the page is really starting to come together. We can see it's starting to look like a real landing page now. Now we're going to add some classes to overwrite the default styling. This first class isn't actually necessary because we're just using the H1 style, but this next one we're going to actually use class H5, which will give our H2 and H5 sizing. So that'll minify that size. H3 again, just repeating that. Ignore this class here. I pasted that in by mistake. Okay, now we're going to add some H5 classes on our H4s, so they're just going to be a little bit smaller, and then again some H5 classes on our H4s, just to resize them to be just a little bit smaller, so they look a little bit nicer and don't overflow to the next line. And then our final H5 class on our final H4. Now we're going to add this 800 class, which is responsible for the font weight. We have font weight in increments of 100 from 100 all the way to 900. So we're going to add some 700s down here for our benefits and features section, and then another 700 down the bottom for our about section, which makes our page really come together a lot better. It's really starting to look like a landing page already. Then we're going to add a heading area with a content class. This is different than most of the other sections. So sections maintain their aspect ratios while divs do not. But if you give it the class of content, it's still going to get that padding around it. And then we have the background light yellow and the H3 and the 800 font weight. And we're going to add a features section right next to them. By default, they're each half width. So those are going to take up the half width, but they're not going to maintain their aspect ratio in the giant box that most content is in. Then we're going to add a form to the top of the page with an email and a button that says sign up for free. And we're going to see how that looks. Actually, we're going to paste in the second button first, which is going to be a secondary button. But right now they're just going to look the same. So we have the form at the top with the enter your email placeholder. And if we type in there, it overwrites the placeholder. And then down here we have the read the guide button. We're just going to make that a secondary button so it stands out a little bit less. And looks nice. Then we're going to add some vertical top classes to all of this content. This isn't strictly necessary. You know, centering the content is fine too, but vertical top is just going to pull all of those items to the top, which makes it a little bit closer to the heading, and I think makes it look a little bit nicer. And we're going to do the same thing for our about section content, so it's kind of nicely aligned with the image to the left. Next thing, we're going to center a few things. So this center class is just going to text center, as well as just like absolute centering our benefits and features in the middle of their containers. And then we're going to add this little filler spacing between, this is the navigation at the top of the page. So this is the non-aspect ratio content box again, except this time it has the class of wide on it, which means it's going to span the two widths or the full width of the page. And then we're going to add a logo image inside of there with a class of logo, which gives it a default width. And then we're going to add some navigation, just a couple navigation links, which are going to be aligned to the right automatically for us. And you can see it has some padding around it, but it's not you know, a box like the giant boxes on the rest of the page that maintain their aspect ratio. We're going to do the same thing in the footer. We're just going to add a non-aspect ratio div down there with a class of content and a class of wide, so it gets the padding and it gets the full width. And then we're going to add an inner div in there with a font weight of 600 and paste some links inside of that footer. And let's see what that looks like at all different screen sizes. So we're just going to go to the tablet screen size and go through the whole page and just see how everything just works automatically for you at tablet layout, except the benefits and features are in the wrong spot. And our spacing is a little bit weird, but we're going to fix that later. But everything just looks pretty nice automatically. We also have these two images right in a row. We're going to fix that too. And if we go all the way down to mobile, yeah, it still looks really good. We got all our features and our benefits, our about section and our footer. All the buttons look good. The form looks good. So let's switch back here. We're just going to clean up a little bit. So first we're going to add this desktop class to this features heading, which is going to make sure it only displays on desktop. So if we resize the page down to tablet, we're going to see that that features heading no longer shows up. And we only have three media query type classes. There's tablet, mobile, and desktop. We're going to add the two other classes to this duplicated features heading down here, tablet and mobile, so that on tablet and mobile it does show up down there, and then on desktop it's going to show up. In the right order and not in between them. So that those are our media query classes, or just our viewport classes, right, that are just going to display that element at certain viewports. Then we're going to add this nice little thing up here where if we type in that input right now, it's going to erase the placeholder, but right now we can add this floating label placeholder by just adding a field set element around our form and place a label below the input there. And now when we type in it, we're going to get this really nice label that pops up above it so that the user can see what the label of the form is while they're writing into it. So that's just a nice kind of thing that we get from boxes just by surrounding an input and a label with a field set element. Now we're going to just do a little bit of cleanup. So we're going to add these shift classes. These aren't strictly necessary, but they make things look just a little bit nicer. So if we go down to the features and benefits, we'll notice they look a little bit off center compared to the content below them. And that's just because all the content below them is left aligned, and so it leaves these ragged edges on the right side, which makes the headings look a little bit off-center to the right. And this just happens on desktop, so we're going to set these desktop shift classes that are just going to shift the content over to the left a little bit and make the headings look a little bit more centered. Again, not strictly necessary, but kind of nice. And we're going to do the same thing for the inner content of the features section, where we're just going to shift two sections slightly to the right. And you'll notice that on the right hand side of the feature section, when we shift it, these are going to be shifted a little bit to the right, and then so that's going to be more inside of the feature section, and then we're going to shift the other ones in the benefit section a little bit to the left. So we can see that right here. It's just going to shift those to the left, just making the benefits and the feature section just feel a little bit separated, especially on desktop. And again, this isn't strictly necessary, but these are just some nice cleanup things. Now we're going to go down to the about section, and we're going to shift this whole entire about section to the left, so that it's going to look like it's centered in the page. So right now we have this giant empty space to the left of this about section, and we just want to shift the about section into there. So we're just going to put this shift class there. Again, it's only going to work on desktop, and it's just going to shift that box right into the center of the page, into that empty box on the left. And then we're going to also shift the inner contents just a little bit closer to the image. Again, this is all not strictly necessary, but it's just a nice little cleanup to the page, just shifting things around slightly so that some empty space is filled in. And we can just see what it looks like without that. And then once we add those shift classes back in, we're going to see how much nicer it looks. And again, it's not a big difference, but I don't know, I kind of prefer it. And you can get that from those desktop shift classes when you're most likely to need to shift things around. We're also going to have this special tablet class. So normally on tablet devices, the inner boxes continue to maintain their aspect ratio as like little square boxes. But if we add this class, we can get rid of that. And we can see the difference here. So we already have that class on this section right here where we have the boxes, and then this is the one we're aiming for, where everything, where the content is able to just flow naturally and we don't get that extra space. So we're going to have this tablet wide inner content, and we're going to just add that there. So now our benefits and features sections are just allowed to take up as much space as they need to. Then we're going to add a desktop class to this top image. Remember, this is the image that is displaying too close to the other image. So we kind of want to like move it down below the next section of content on tablet and mobile. So we're going to add a desktop class to that so that it's hidden on tablet. And then we're going to copy and paste it and attach tablet and mobile classes to the duplicated media. And so that's going to display on only tablet and mobile, and the other one will only display on desktop. So now you can see it's appearing in the right spot, and it's not right next to the other image. But then on desktop, they are going to appear right in a row, but kind of like they're in alternating columns. Okay, so next we're just going to add a few more things to just clean up a little bit. So yeah, and I just want to reiterate that the tablet and mobile classes are only going to display on tablet and mobile. Okay, so now we're going to just add this filler spacer in here. So this is just a non-aspect ratio div with a content class on it, so it's going to get that padding. And that's just going to add a little spacer right in there. And that's what the div content wide is perfect for, is just adding little spacers. Then we're going to add an opacity class in here. So the footer is a little bit dark. So we're going to just lighten that up with a 0.65. And we have opacity classes from 0.5 all the way up to 0.9. And we're going to also add that to a span around our free label here. And that's going to lighten up that free text inside the sign up button and just make that look just a little bit nicer. And you can use 0.5, 0.55, 0.65, 0.6, etc., all the way up to 0.9 for that. The last thing we're going to do to clean up is just add a modal video package in here that's going to make this button clickable and pop up a YouTube video. And so for that, we're using a library called Modal Video, and we added that from the CDN unpackaged to the top of the page. We added the JavaScript as well as the CSS. And then we're going to add a clickable media class from Boxes.css to this image, and that's going to make hovering over the media just a much brighter saturation and brightness, so that it looks like the button is clickable, which is kind of a nice effect. And then we're going to add this data video ID. This is from the modal video package. We just give it a YouTube ID, and then we add a script to the end of the page with an add event listener to wait for the DOM content to be loaded, because we have defer on our modal video script. So then we initialize modal video and pass in the class that we want clicking on it to trigger the YouTube video. And now when we click on that image, we're going to get the YouTube pop-up. And that's how you create a beautiful landing page with Boxes.css.